Thanks for being with me tonight. We have a nice session tonight. The title of today's webinar is The Mechanics of Creating Health. So it's a very kind of simple, basic idea, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Yeah, right. We all need this topic. Yeah, we'll have a lot of fun moving into this area, and it's a great foundation for a lot of healing work, which is really nice to do live, right? It's nice to do a recording afterwards too, which is also a kind of live, but for everybody that's here, thank you for being with me, and we'll dive right in. It's been very effective to start our energy healing webinars with a few minutes of silence right at the beginning. For one thing, that gives people an opportunity, a few people to come, any people that are coming a few minutes late, but also the foundation of all effective energy healing is each person's individual connection to the source of creation. So why not start with the highest first and go into the silence and just get ourselves anchored in and established with that first, and then we'll take off and do some great healing work tonight. All right, so I'll say let's close our eyes, and then after I've said that, after about 3 minutes, we'll open our eyes and we'll do the prayer of gratitude, and then a brief overview of what is energy healing, and then lots of healing work. All right, thanks everyone for being with me. Let's close our eyes. All right, let's open our eyes, take a minute. Even in 3 minutes, it's possible to go very deep. We don't want to strain the system by coming out too fast. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything. All of us, all of our ancestors, that bridge of pure knowingness, which connects the source of creation to the entire manifest field of creation, eternal tradition of wisdom. Thank you to all of you for being here and for our ability to work concisely and efficiently. We want to collectively examine the field of creating health, each person's individual potential for creating health, and how collectively we activate individual potential to function at its highest, most profound level. With all gratitude to those strokes of experience and understanding, which not only alleviate symptoms and bring about great, profound healing for the body, but also integrate the energy healing process itself so that that becomes a tool for everyone. May our session today meet and exceed the needs and desires and wishes of everyone here. May we do beautiful healing work for ourselves and for the world. And may everyone who attends this session be blessed in the highest. Thank you. All right. So, what is energy healing? Energy healing is using attention to leverage the potential of consciousness to affect concrete changes and healthful transformations on the surface of life. We want to use consciousness in its most potent and complete form. So we go first to the source of creation. So for those of you who joined us after we started our silence, we did that because it's really nice to have the direct experience of the source of creation in the beginning before we even start the healing process. It's very nice to just check in and connect in and see what's going on for everybody in the group. Before the session even started tonight, my first experience as I was just sitting with everyone quietly was such a sweet heart connection tonight, such a deep, lovely, soft feeling in the whole heart area for tonight's work and for our time together. And for myself during that time of silence, it was even more so, even more pronounced. So thank you all, even just for that. It is the heart connection. Yeah, right? Other people felt that too. Very sweet. The deep heart connection is the expression of what's happening at the finest level of the physiology. And I use these terms for those who are not familiar. I use various terms to describe the layers from more dense level of the self down to a more subtle level of the self. But the subtlest manifestation of our bodies and our beings, I use the word causal to describe. And that's the level where that softness and sweetness and connection is being made. So one of the things I see with that is the harshness or the intensity of current events has strengthened everybody in this group, has it strengthened us all in our ability to draw upon the resources that act as a counter-resonation or as an interference pattern to the heavier energies that have been rifling through our collective field. I don't have to describe them too much detail because the news will do that for you. But what's important is that as life becomes less certain due to health challenges, the pandemic, and so forth, the demonstrations and so forth, our ability to connect with each other and to do so in a way which is genuine and powerful and extremely pure in its intention has clearly increased. So hats off to everyone who's here, and thank you for having evolved that. Yeah, I didn't even know, I didn't know until we started to meet tonight. Then it's like I saw it, and I was amazed at how everybody has changed and how we've grown in our ability to intimately connect and use the power of the tender feeling level of our physiologies to promote those waves of experience that will really heal ourselves and everybody else. So on that note, that's the recap of what is energy healing. On that note, let's dive into today's session, mechanics of creating health. I mentioned in the description for this today's course that we would go through the different layers of the physiology and look at how the mechanics of creating health manifest, or how the laws of nature, which particular laws of nature manifest at which levels of the physiology. It's good to have like a really strong foundation and overview. But I'd like to say that first, it makes a lot of sense for each one of us to offer any personal desires or intentions for healing, because we're going to follow this process from the source of creation all the way up. So we may as well have an intention. And I really love the idea of everyone who's here tonight, that we all get our personal healing as well. And I just want you guys to know, like, I'm not perfect. I have my little issues, this and that. And I always find that our energy healing webinars uplifts and upgrades my own healing potential as well. And I always feel really amazing, especially good, and often will notice like really good long-term consistent changes and upgrades. Yeah, right? Other people too, having that too. Yeah, so it's very sweet. So I thank everyone for beautiful, beautiful everyone. Thank you for being here. All right. So let's just take a moment, and just what we're going to do in this moment is just kind of organize our priorities. Just make sure you know, and probably all of us have a whole range or spectrum of different areas that we'd like to see improved and healed. But we'll just to arrange priorities and make sure that that's clear as we take this journey through the process of energy healing. Having the clear priorities helps to ensure that your intentions are realized. All right. The intentions, they come to rest. There's a gap. You notice we do our intentions and then there's a silence. In the gap, the intention falls into the bed of the silence of creation, the silent source of creation. And being, divine being, shines the light of totality on that intention, on your desire. Places it in the context of cosmic evolution, because cosmic evolution is being administrated through the whole universe all the time, from that very, very large, very expanded, I talked about that last time. I used this hand motion to describe that sort of universal Brahman level of self, the big self, the big eternal self, Mother Divine, Mother of Creation. And on that note, because we're starting at the source of creation, right? That's where we're starting with this thing. On that note, I'd just like to add that the reality of the Mother of Creation, that I use that word just to clarify, to describe the biggest, most complete, total expression of all that is. It includes all that silent, unmanifest source of creation, all this manifest level of creation, that largest and most complete of all living expressions, of which we are all a part. And that energy has been more lively and more palpably present on Earth over the last few weeks. And it's been a bit of a rough go. As we all know, we were between eclipses up until last weekend. In fact, the last webinar actually fell on the day of an eclipse. So that period between the eclipses and the period between tends to be a time of great purification. It is an optimal time for directly diving awareness into the source of creation. You'll find that the laws of nature during an eclipse or through the period, the weeks between the eclipses, that the ability for the body to settle down and soak in source energy is actually enhanced. And the reason is that the turbulence that's experienced not just on the most superficial level of life, but also in the finer relative levels of life, all that area can be very, very intense during the eclipse and during the period between them. And so, because they're all, right, they come in pairs, right? There's a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. And so it is a wonderful time. The body knows that it's easier to dive into the silence of being at that time. Awareness is easier for awareness. For those of you who don't have direct mental techniques to do that, note the times when you're falling asleep at night, and note times when the awareness rises. Sometimes it'll be like rising up to the surface and diving back in during the night sleep period. And there can be often more turbulent night experiences during that time. And the reason is that the body knows that when it transitions between waking, dreaming, and sleeping, yeah, see, raised hands on that account. Me too. I noticed it too. But that, yeah, because during waking, dreaming, and sleeping, anytime we're transitioning between those states, that's when the opportunity to sit deeply in the gap or that silent period between the states of consciousness. And so even as I said, even the subtle experiences during the eclipse or between the eclipses can be very turbulent and very intense. And so the body likes to settle down. It likes to experience the contrast to that. And by establishing that contrasting experience, that silence of being experience, totality is honored. Mother Divine is honored. The wholeness of creation is given a home in our bodies to express itself more completely. It's like a child giving a gift to their mother. The child is so little and doesn't have so many resources, but gives the gift anyway, because doing so fulfills the dharma of the child and the mother at the same time. It fulfills the requirements of creation at that moment. This is very sweet. It's very sweet. All right. So the intention going into the source of creation is like a gift. It's a gift to the totality. And as awareness bounces, starts to, I was going to say bounces back out from the silence of being. And for some of us, that's like completely out. And for others, the silence is still there, but there's some bouncing, right? Some bouncing. As the bouncing occurs at the gap, the level between what's manifest and what's not manifest, right in there, lots of very interesting things happen. And I'm organizing in my mind how to describe for you guys, because it's so It is such a field. It's such a fascinating field. For one thing, in the silence of being in the source of creation, there are these two modes you've heard me talk about. There's that mode of silence resting in its own nature, and there's that mode of that silence being awake to its own nature. And right in there, there's some bouncing that goes on. And the bouncing that goes on in that location is responsible, it's the seed energy for all the healings and all the solutions, and the seed energy for your pure potential, and the seed energy for the healing space that we create around us. That's why I go through this long rigmarole at the beginning of our sessions here with the prayer and the silence, because we're creating this healing space. And the more effective, the more perfectly formed the healing space is for your needs, the more easily and effortlessly all the laws of nature that heal the body can function. So creating the healing space is really important. And I don't often come out and blatantly say, now I'm creating the healing space, but I do the prayer, we do the silence, we do the prayer, we talk about what is energy healing, and all that contributes together to create this situation. Also, just the fact that we're all of you are here in the comfort of your homes, in the comfort of your space. It's just truth. It's very important. The truth. It's a space where you know you can trust what you experience. You can trust your subjective experience. It's very important. That level of trust is very important. As I was saying, there's this gap. There's actually a gap in the whole unmanifest level of creation between silence resting and silence alert. And in that gap, there, I'm thinking of a very funny metaphor. You know how, when like someone gets an inheritance or something, and then all these people like wedge themselves in there. Well, like the tax people need to get their cut, and the insurance people need to get their cut, and the IRS needs to get its cut, and all these people like wedge themselves into that gap between, or like say the medical industry, you've got the person who's sick, and then you've got the doctors, and there's going to be a big money exchange. There's what, a multi-billion-dollar industry or something, trillion-dollar industry. It's a big industry, and so lots of people, insurance companies and different groups will wedge themselves in there. Well, it's a little bit like that gap in the unmanifest silent source of creation between silence resting and silence awake. There are so many ways to appreciate that gap. And each way, each angle, and each perspective on what goes on in that gap, where that little oscillation or wave occurs back and forth between totally absorbed in its own nature to awake, aware that it is like that. Each one of those different angles can reflect on each other. It's very complicated. So as each angle reflects on one of the other angles, then just as an example, you can have silence, absolute infinite silence, collapsing to infinite dynamism, or you can have infinite dynamism collapsing back into infinite silence, and they make a little loop. That's what that oscillation or wave is in there. So that's one example of infinite silence to infinite dynamism. But then infinite silence can look at infinite dynamism and say, oh, you are my own nature. And infinite dynamism can look at infinite silence and say, oh, you are my own nature. And so you start to get relationships, and it's really quite an incredible, elaborate. And that's just one example. And there are many examples of divisions that occur, or I wouldn't even say divisions, because it's a divisionless level of creation, but more ways in which absolute unmanifest silent being understands its own nature. Many ways, many ways. Yeah, yeah, right. Perspectives of itself, exactly. You guys are beautiful. So there's that. There's that lovely little oscillating point of creation that's deep inside. And all the ways that it understands itself are good and evolutionary and valuable. And we need lots of ways to do that because we need to create, you need to create your pure potential. We need to create Agni. Agni is born in there. Agni being the first primordial fire of creation, the seed of it's the seed of the awake within itself level of creation, Agni. And at that level. Uh, yeah, so and that's the seed of all the metabolic fires in the body and digestion, right? Healthy digestion. Um, so pure potential, the healing space, Agni, sacred inner sanctum of the self, is all these have their seeds down in this space. Absolute truth, uh, absolute victory, absolute um, grace, divine grace, all these forms, like they're born out of that beautiful, beautiful relationship, that first relationship. And then this pure potential, which is as yet unmanifests, rises up into that another gap. There's another gap between the unmanifest level of creation and the finest relative manifest level of creation. So that's an important gap because that's between not existence and existence. Or we could say pure existence and defined existence. That's even probably better because pure existence is still down here at the absolute level. And that point, that gap right there, that's where your intention goes. That's where the intention goes. Because the intention can sit at that gap and it can just bounce against the absolute, bounce in and out of the uh, infinite resource of all healing energies so that it gains power and it gains energy and it gains clarity. When the light of absolute being shines on our intentions, a lot of times it clarifies the intentions. A lot of times it enriches them and puts them in perspective, the perspective of cosmic evolution that's happening all the time anyway. And that's where the first, tenderest, most delicate impulses of feeling in the heart, that's where we experience that. So all this healing space that we create at the beginning of our webinars, it has a reality in that gap between the unmanifest and the finest relative level of creation. And our connection as a circle of light, our connection as beings dedicated to the highest for ourselves and for everyone, that unified intention is right there. And I'm looking because this is just responding, my physiology is responding, and then I'm reading off of my physiology, its response, that there is a concern that destructive laws of nature also go down into that area. They do. It's a little bit like virtual particles being born out of a vacuum or something. You know, they come out in pairs. They pop out in pairs like that. The pairs, they'll pop out of the virtual vacuum and then they'll fold back into the vacuum, and it's like it's a little quantum event. Like it's sort of, you can say, well, did it even happen? But the thing is that the pairs are diametrically opposed opposites. So yeah, we create the healing space, but the other half of the pair, the other half of that intention for the well-being of everything in creation is the expression of the potential for growth, basically. So there's an intention. One side is the intention, the healing space, and the intention to create some good. And the other is the expression that there's something that could grow right there. There's something that could evolve. There's something that could change. There's something that could improve. So your intention, when I say your intention, is down at that gap between the absolute level and the finest relative level. It includes the part of the intention that says, I've been unhappy about this particular situation, and so I would like to find the solution for this situation. So those pieces, you can't get a good solution unless you have a well-defined problem or concern. So they all exist together, but they exist for the sake of the evolution, right? For the sake of the transformation, for the sake of that unmanifest divinity finding its way into the boundaries and limitations of this reality. Nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be concerned. Even the large problems, the really difficult problems, they have their corresponding interference pattern. They have a healing expression that goes with them. So that's the gap between the finest relative and the absolute. And I'm just watching that because, again, I have to revisit when I was just looking at it a second ago, there was this feeling, but yes, what if the negativity is just so great? What if it's at like a very kind of big, sort of a cosmic level? What if we also have to deal with cosmic negativity? So what do we do about that? Remember I mentioned how the ego is a spectrum? The ego is a spectrum. So from the level of individual awareness, a cosmic level of negativity can seem like, oh, it's going to be overwhelming. But luckily we have the flexibility, and this is what's happening at this very, very fine level, is increasing stability and flexibility. This is the healing that's happening at this very fine gap level between the absolute and the finest relative, is increasing stability and adaptability. The stability anchors our connection to being, to divine being, to source. The flexibility allows us to view problems from varieties of positions or varieties of perspectives on self, on who we are. At the cosmic level, there's like nothing wrong. It's right, everything's perfect. So even the biggest, most malevolent energy that could grip the whole of mankind, some big thing like that, even something that big is just seen in its completeness, in its role within the context of the entire universe, from that larger, more expanded level of self-identity or ego. It's really good. Not only that, but that expanded level of ego has the confidence of knowing how to locate all the different resources that we need to deal with anything. So as we're doing this as individuals, it seems that we are in good company around the world with many people that are doing this type of work and that are looking to find viable solutions for our world. Solutions outside the box. And I'm just feeling that original softness of our connection with our group tonight. That softness is also present in the web of life. It's also present in the astral level of our world. we're drawing in resources, the whole family of well-wishers for humanity are receiving access to the resources of being through the grace of our group, our energy healing webinar right now. Because we just spent so many minutes talking fine mechanics of connection to the resource of the infinite resource of the field of divine being. Mother Divine, you can say also Mother Divine, and feeling very much this sort of lively presence of that Mother Divine energy with us tonight. So all that softness is just beautiful. So being we're placing, our group is spontaneously, I'm just describing to you what we're doing because I'm watching it happen. We're placing ourselves strategically in this gap between the manifest, finest manifest, and the unmanifest level of creation in order to be the providers to the providers. So all the well-wishers of humanity, all the well-wishers of mankind are on board right now, and they're engaged. Some of them are looking at the news. Some of them are relaxing after a hard day, right? Some of them are just starting their day. All over the world, different times are we're connected with all the different times, and we are in this position to engage our physiologies as a channel of resource. So as the resource from the source of creation moves through our collective healing circle, it heals and nourishes and provides resource to our physiologies as well. So as we move up to the next levels, we can just know that we're also anchoring this quality of access to the source of creation for everyone. Thank you all for being that. Thank you for being so wise and even thinking of it. I just saw it after y'all did it, that's all. Makes me sound like a Midwesterner, doesn't it? Anyway, all right, so we have this anchor. We have this anchor to the source of creation. The finest level of the physiology is a very intimate, very personal, we access through the heart center area. And this, now we're talking full on the causal level of the physiology. This causal level of the physiology where the nuanced features of each person's personal healing space makes itself known. It sort of stabilizes. So each one of us has a space for healing that's unique and yet very similar. It's very similar to each other because we're all riding in these human physiologies that come from a kind of universal template or blueprint. And all the universal archives are accessible in the causal level of creation. All these, it's like a level of creation where there's very concentrated energy. So archives of information, blueprints, templates, all these forms have a reality in the causal level of the body. Again, we access here, we access through heart connection because the heart energy center has the ability to understand experience without, well, first of all, it's before voice and speech. So it's a very kind of primal level of understanding. It's a direct understanding. And it goes without judgments. And that I discovered just this week is because these organs, like the digestive organs that are kind of in the foundation of the heart energy center, like the heart energy center goes from the throat area down to the solar plexus area, right? And it's like this whole big Mahamarma is the word I use to describe. There's like a head Mahamarma, heart Mahamarma, and a abdominal lower gut Mahamarma. But it includes organs of digestion. And it was an interesting realization that there's a mechanism that engages in the liver. Liver does so many things, right? Like there are more than 100 different important, I think I read somewhere 130. They're like, anyway, it's a lot, at least 100 different really important functions that the liver performs for the physiology. The liver, one of the things it does is it very innocently, without judgment, it receives the nutrient-rich blood from the intestines, right? So the nutrients are absorbed in the small intestine, large intestine, and the blood first, it goes to the liver. And in that place, the liver does a lot of like sorting and categorizing of the nutritional resources that we are using. And that sorting and categorizing, it is such a sweet, innocent, it has an element of, more than 500. Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you. I so appreciate you, my lovely dear friend who is so intelligent. She says, according to Hopkins medicine, more than 500 vital functions have been identified with the liver. Isn't that amazing? What a beautiful thing it is. Some of the more well-known functions include production of bile, which helps carry away waste and break down fats in the small intestine during digestion. Production of certain proteins for the blood plasma. Awesome. That is awesome. So thank you for that. So appreciated. There are, according to Ayurveda, which is a very ancient form of natural medicine that has Vedic roots. My background is Vedic, essentially. There are 5 agnis that reside, or fires of digestion that reside in the liver. And it's interesting that there are more than 500 vital functions, because you could say each agni could be overseeing, 100 functions or something. But the thing about the agnis is their role is to get the nutrients divided into certain categories. And that process is a very sort of mechanical process. And it's not a process that's performed with judgment or assumptions or expectations or anything like that. It just happens so innocently. And it is that innocence, and you think about how the liver is a very large, fairly large organ down here, just at the foundation of the heart energy center. And its electromagnetic frequency is this great discriminating intelligence that performs its function without judgment. And so it's adding that energy to the heart energy center. So because we have human physiologies, we all will create certain types of healing spaces for ourselves that have certain similarities, because everybody's liver functions without judgment. It's like a really beautiful organ. I'm just feeling so much attention and so much love flowing into the liver and into the intelligence of the liver. So we have organs, and then from the causal level of our physiologies, each organ has its own unique intelligence signature. We could call it an intelligence signature. The Vedic word would be devata, but intelligence signature is a good word, I think. Yes. Yes. And a lady just sent in a point about the heart, and she really impressed me the other day by using the word heart brain, because there's such a big neural network in the heart, right? So the heart is really the orchestrator of activities for the entire physiology, because the electromagnetic field produced by the heart is so powerful, and it's so overshadowingly larger than the electromagnetic fields produced by any other organs, liver, brain, any of the other organs, that it's kind of like an administrator for the physiology. It's producing an electromagnetic impulses, which then are picked up by all the other organs, and all the other organs function in their way. I wanted to say about that, though, that before I go to her comment, is that our attention on the liver and on the intelligence of the liver is extremely life-supporting, not only for our livers, but because we are working as energy healers right now. We are light workers in this session. What happens is our attention on our livers not only heals our own livers, but it activates these values or qualities, these qualities of intelligence that reside in the liver for the entire collective. And it's so important at this time in history. It's so very important for the discriminating power of humanity to rise and make sense out of chaos, because it has been, there have been so many influences that have had such a sort of chaotic effect, right? And now, and I know we don't have as many Europeans with us tonight. There'll be more with us tomorrow. But in America, the protests that arose from, from the death in Minneapolis, George Floyd's death, the protests were such an incredibly intense expression of chaos around the country. And I know that the protests were designed originally to be expressions of order, but that's not what happened. A lot of chaos ensued. So the reason I mention that is that our world really needs that energy right now. It needs that orderliness energy, and it needs the energy to come without judgment. It needs it to come without judgment, right there. So the way we heal our own physiologies becomes, it's like intimately linked to the rest of our human collective, and it provides a pathway for changes, cultural and social changes to take place, collective changes. It provides a blueprint. Did I not say that at the collective level, that's where the blueprints are, right? This is silence resting on itself, that silence awake, and then there's the blueprint, templates, blueprints, forms, subtle forms of creation there at the causal level. Each with their own unique Davic intelligence, each with their own intelligence. Just letting that happen. I'm just feeling that flow going out into the collective. So we are the livers of the planet, organizing and detoxifying. Oh, you are so cute. Yes. Yeah, we're the livers. We're the livers. And it says here too, there's several beautiful comments. A huge percentage of the population have liver problems, cholesterol, diabetes, buildup of toxins. So putting attention on the liver is great for all of humanity. Absolutely. In fact, my sister-in-law is a medical doctor. And a decade or more ago, when I was doing energy healing, she and I had this lovely walk and talk. And she said, Dorothy, if you can ever find a way for energy healing to help people with problems with their livers and kidneys. She mentioned both of those two. She said in her field, she sees so much damage to liver and kidneys. And she said Western medicine just hasn't really found an effective solution for these organs yet. So she's a very compassionate woman, very sweet woman. So shout out to Beth there. Anyway, yeah, so we're finding it. And as we find it, what we do in these energy healing webinars, and I know a lot of you guys have been with me for like a really long time. We've got folks who've been here for years working, is we're using that Saturn-like energy. We're building up our understanding and our ability to heal in layers and layers. So we create this very stable structure, which will have blessing benefits for our world for many, many long times to come. I don't know, but hopefully for hundreds or thousands of years, the seeds that we're planting here at this time will benefit humanity and benefit mankind for a really long time to come. So absolutely, healings, we can yes, it's like we're offering the combination of impulses of consciousness which guide the intelligence of the liver in general for all people, because we have our little human blueprint physiologies. So the type of intelligence that's responsible for healing for our individual livers, also that same type of intelligence, it benefits from the work that we're giving. Beautiful job, everyone. Maybe here's this other comment I would like to return. She says, maybe the heart is in the gap between physiology and energy. And maybe the heart is really the source of knowledge for the organs. I definitely would agree that the heart is at least providing perspective for all the organs. It's my experience that the source of creation is the real resource, and then the heart, it translates. Yes, it translates in the gap between the source of creation and, yes, emits out. Yes, it translates between that source energy and this manifest level of creation. And I use that because I use the heart area sort of as a metaphor, because the translation is starting out in the causal level. That's the first area where we start to translate what is this unmanifest, infinite, eternal source of creation, and how does it start to make itself into something that we can eventually understand as our physiologies, as our bodies. So that's the causal body. I took a lot of time on the causal body. We will have to go very quickly through the other layers. But that's okay. We also have tomorrow. So we can go back if I miss anything or skip anything, or any salient points come up or go unexpressed tonight, we can revisit them tomorrow. But the next layer up, as we're coming up to the transition between the causal level of the physiology and the astral level, we come up into this beautiful spot. This is another gap, right? It's another gap, we could say, where the interactions between the resonating spaces of the causal body. And for more on that, if that reference seems a little abstract to you, definitely check my video on the causal body. I have videos on YouTube and also a blog on the knowledge base. It's all free, with more detail of the causal body. But as the archives and the blueprints and the templates and the devata, the beings and all that, they're like, each one is like a unique space in the causal field of the physiology. And all these spaces have pure, unmanifest being, life force resonating within them. And so each one is like an instrument in the orchestra playing its own song, so to say, or playing its own notes. And then the notes work together. If they work together harmoniously, then we get an effect at the surface, which we call health. And if they're fighting with each other, or they're creating tension, which is what notes can do, is they can have a tense relationship with each other, then we get effects at the surface that can be less comfortable. But these effects work together and they start to create a sort of cacophony. And at the very densest level of the causal body, there's a kind of like a fog or a mist, or in Vedic descriptions, it's described as a mist right there. But there's a kind of like a cloud, or just like just a field of expression, a field of expression. It's very fine. It's very, very, very delicate, but it's more expressed than those unmanifest spaces, or those like barely defined spaces that act as resonating chambers for being. So the mist is there, and in the mist, I'm just checking everyone's intention, that the intention is still solid, that the intention is still pure, that the intention is still clean and well-defined and aligned with cosmic evolution. and harnessing all the potential that's in that level. The mist becomes more defined and more defined. And as it rises up to the astral level, we start to see that, oh, it's not really a mist. It's more like little fine, fine hair-like threads. And then we realize, oh, but the threads, they form together and they make thicker, bigger threads and cords. And so the whole astral level of the physiology is where consciousness takes this form of these channels of energy or threads of energy, streams, filaments. And of course, when you have, imagine, you have energy which is looping in on its own nature. So that's what we've got going on down at the steeper levels. We've got a kind of a hum, a deep hum of creation kind of going in on its folding, consciousness is folding in on its own nature. And imagine that you took something like that, that's going, say it's in a little loop like this, and we put a little bit of force behind it. If you put a little force behind something that's going in a loop, you get this, right? It starts to move. So what happens is, if you have the loop, if we look at the loop from this direction, it's looping like this, but we put a little force behind it, you start to get something that looks like a sine wave, right? It looks like that. It's really looping, right? But it looks like it's just going up and down. And so this is what happens at the astral level, is that life force that's sitting within the subtler levels of the self starts to like branch out. It starts to stretch a little bit. It starts to find ways of expressing itself more completely. And as a result, those little self-referral loops of consciousness start to become little worms. They become like little worms of consciousness. So the astral level. And that's, yes. And a lady who asked a question about sound healing for tonight is saying that this might be why sound healing works. And I would say that's probably very likely. And I was gonna, is it time? Oh, it's even time to start questions in just a minute here. We've got some really, really great questions for tonight. So I do want to make sure that I honor everyone's questions. But since it's coming up right now, I think I'll just go ahead and address this question. And that is, what are the mechanics of sound healing? And how can we better understand using this therapy to resolve health conditions? For example, and then she talks about binaural beats, which I'm not really such an expert about binaural beats, but it's kind of an interesting description because I didn't know this. She knows a lot. This lady knows a lot about stuff. So she said binaural beat therapy is where two different frequencies are taking place, one in each ear. So you've got a beat in that ear and a beat in that ear that's different. And that the two then produce a third frequency. And this is the difference between the two distinct frequencies. And that different binaural beat patterns can produce different physiological responses like relaxation and mental clarity. And she's asking, what is the mechanism by which this happens? And what part of the brain is involved in creating that frequency that is between the other two? So I am not enough of a physicist or an expert in binaural beats to really answer every part of that question. But I can give you my perspective. As a longtime musician and music teacher, I can give you my perspective that every pitch has other pitches contained within it. Every pitch. In fact, I could actually demonstrate this for you. I just happen to have my flute right here because I play my flute all the time. So watch my fingers not move. I know, how about that? No, so my fingers do not move. I'm gonna play a low D. And by the way, I did not play today, so I'm not warmed up, so don't mind that. Anyway, I've got lipstick on. Okay, we'll try that again. So we've got the low D going. And then within this D, there are other notes that you don't actually consciously hear, but they exist. So watch, my fingers do not move. Can I go higher? But you get the idea. If I were warmed up, I could go up several more notches. But anyway, that's the principle, is that the first note, the first D contains all those other notes. And so you can almost hear the first one. The first one's the first note up. You can sort of, if you like tune your hearing, you can hear it a little bit. So what happens is when you get two different notes, two different pitches, like say a D and a B, on a flute, the D and the B are really reactive. So if I play a D and my friend plays a B on their flute, these two notes share certain of those upper higher notes, they share them. So what'll happen is when I play the D, all the higher notes that are hidden within the D also sound, but we don't really hear them. But if I play the B, all the upper notes within the B also sound, but because the B shares some of those notes with the D, then those particular notes that are shared between the B and the D, they dominate, and you will actually hear it like a kind of a buzzing overtone sound. So that's my best explanation for why binaural beats do that, is that is that the notes don't seem, the B and the D, when I played them, they didn't seem to share that much in common, but they do share some of the what they call overtones in musical language. All right. Okay, so such delightful comments are coming in. I am delighted that a small person is watching. Anyway, so her point about sound healing, how sound healing works. And this also will relate to how energy healing works at those fine levels, is that just like the sounds on my flute that you can't really hear, they influence you. They do. If I sing ma ba and I change the shape of the back of my throat, and I change, when I change, that sounds really weird, doesn't it? But you can see I'm changing the shape of my throat. I'm actually causing different overtones to dominate. So the difference between the flute playing a D and Dorothy singing a D, or a piano playing a D, or a trumpeter playing a D, or guitar, or whatever, is which of those overtones are dominating. And they color the sound. They color the sound. That's why you can tell the difference. If you're hearing a trumpet, you're like, that's a trumpet. If you're hearing a flute, you're like, that's a flute. So it's the presence and the dominance of those overtones that influence. Well, it's the same in energy healing, that what's happening at the causal level of physiology is we have these resonating chambers, and depending on the size and shape, that's why we spent so much time today talking about your sacred healing space, right? Setting yourself up to be in your safe space, because the shape of your safe space will determine what type of vibration is produced by the interaction between that space and the energy of divine being. Does that make sense? Divine being, unmanifest wholeness, it rises up, it bubbles up, and it goes into the causal level, into the blueprints and the templates and the structures there, the subtle structures, and it makes a note. It's basically a note. It's not a note you can hear. It's like the notes that were inside my flute note, right? That you don't really hear them, but like they color experience, they color perception. The difference between feeling anxious all the time or feeling like you're in your safe, comfy space is what's going on with your healing space, with your sacred inner sanctum. In your sacred inner sanctum, are you holding a structure which makes you feel like you can trust, makes you feel safe and trusting and so forth? Then if that's the case, then you're set up nicely to do some good healing. All right. Let's see. Right. So the brain can create the common note. Thank you, Alicia. Oh, I wasn't going to say people's names, but anyway, yes, the lady who asked about the sound healing. So what happens is one auditory cortex is mostly hearing one of the pitches, and the other auditory cortex is mostly hearing the other. And in between them, whatever is the common uh, overtones will activate. And so that's why you get a third beat. And I don't have a lot of experience with binaural beats, but I'm under the impression that a lot of times they're produced by a synthesizer type of instrument. They're produced electronically. And so if you have a synthesizer producing a pitch, it makes a very smooth wave, Whereas an instrument like an oboe or a saxophone, like they make more like buzzing kind of sounds. They make like complicated waves like that, if that makes sense. If you look at them, laid out, like if you have a computer analyze the wave, you get a more complicated wave. So the synthesizer sound can produce this like perfectly smooth wave, which means that extraneous overtones are not included. What makes a oboe or a saxophone wave bumpy is the extra overtones that are being drawn in. All right, I hope that helped. But the important thing, the application of this question is that you create right here. We create in the causal level of our being, these beautiful spaces. How many people have dreams of places? Do you ever dream of places like sacred temples or places you've been in the past, right? I love the nuanced energies that are associated with sacred sites around the world. For example, I often in my dream state like to go be in different sacred sites, different caves in the Himalayas, and just there's so many precious locations, and they're chambers. The caves are chambers, and temples that are built according to certain standards of perspective. I'm going to say proportion. They're like sacred. They're like chambers that resonate with certain types of energies. So many within the earth. So many. If you've ever been to Easter Island is a giant volcanic rock that's absolutely filled with spaces. It's like a big piece of Swiss cheese. And so all these sacred spaces, they act like tuning forks. So when you go to a sacred, and you don't have to go physically in person, COVID, you don't need to fly, just the attention, use Google Maps, go and look. And what you can do is you can identify and sort of like pick up the resonation of that space. There's some beautiful spaces. Anyway, so you pick up the resonation of the space, and each space has its own, a unique way in which it processes the light of pure being to produce an effect which is, these are the healing spaces or the healing chambers of Mother Earth, right? Because she's already created spaces, lots of beautiful spaces for her own healing, for her own work. And then when the dolphins and the whales have these like really loud sounds that they make, when they make their sounds go into those chambers, and they vibrate around. They produce that. Beautiful. Oh, and she's saying 2 different tuning forks on either side of the head produce a binaural beat in the electromagnetic field of our bodies and tunes us. Thank you for that description. So anyway, that answers that question. Here's another question from another person. The lady who asked the question about the sound healing also asked 2 other like totally awesome questions. So I'm gonna answer them, but I think I'm gonna answer them tomorrow, maybe because we're running out of time, and I wanna make sure I also answer another person's question who just asked one question, because I know the lady who asked this question will only be with us this evening. So she said, she wonders if we could address a terror that she feels in her system, which seems to come and go without any apparent cause at times, and causes a lot of stress. And wonder how the shifts in the consciousness and identity from the local small individual self to the ground, the foundation of being, might affect emotional, physical, energetic systems. And if part of the terror has something to do with the process that she might be undergoing and resisting. It's a great question, because our collective field is also experiencing a lot of fear and a lot of intensity at this time. So you're not the only one. You know, I understand something like, well, here I go again, trying to guess numbers, but there's a huge number of people who have lost their jobs during the pandemic, like really a lot of people. And there are a lot of businesses that went out of business, and there are people that literally don't know how they're going to move forward economically. And that's not just in the US. Like the economic structures of all the countries, some more than others, obviously, are undergoing a lot of transformation right now. And for a lot of people, the three main areas people feel the most fear is money, survival. They're all survival things. Survival, housing, food, and I'd say we could probably put relationships in there too. But these are the areas where people tend to feel most like they're points of focus when a lot of purification is happening, when there's some unsettled energy in the physiology, or when there's big changes happening in the physiology. Sometimes people will loop back into worrying about money, or worrying about food, or worrying about relationships, or things like that, worrying about their homes. So those are patterns, and everybody has different. There are plenty of outlying things that people also focus on. But the point is that when it depends a little bit on the experience, your experience of the terror, but it could come up from basically two different things. Either there's an imbalance that's moving out of the body, and in that case, there's a purification happening. And it's like when imbalances start to move, we start to notice them. So knowing that something deep and big and heavy that had been carried in your physiology for a long time is starting to move out will shine a light of understanding on the experience and help you to not fall into any of those loops. If we start to loop back into, oh, I'm so frightened because, you know, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. It's the fault of not knowing how to pay my bills. That's why I feel this, or something, you know, when we start to go into those loops, that actually slows down or inhibits the release of that impurity or toxin. And sometimes toxins can be energetic toxins. They can be notes that disagree with each other, that fight with each other, can produce like it's a very unresolved feeling. There's an unresolved feeling that's born of two notes that aren't friendly with each other. And so the system or the being is always looking for resolution. And the more evolved we become, the bigger the hidden challenges are that we can address. So what happens is, because we're humans, we experience life in a linear unfoldment. So we'll address a lesson, learn a lesson, address a problem, learn a lesson, grow, then we're bigger. And then nature says, our being says, oh, there's a harder lesson. So then a more difficult challenge rises, but we're bigger, so we can handle it. And we learn the lesson, and then we grow, and then we're bigger. And then we just keep looping that. We keep doing that all through our lives, you know? And so when these feelings of terror arise, they are indicators that something deep is moving in the system, especially if they come up and they're not attached. You really don't see anything on the outside that could be causing it. It's almost for certain that this feeling is arising because something is purifying in the system. So best practice that I know of, and you can check my knowledge base on that one, would be the healing algorithm. But essentially, if the feeling is very uncomfortable, the more, and this comes up to the next part of your question, is where the awareness is positioned on the spectrum between individual ego and cosmic ego, the more uncomfortable the feeling is, that means like the larger it is and the more it's affecting your larger body. And when I say larger body, I mean not just your physical form, but also your more environmental form, like your house is part of your larger body, and your country is part of your larger body, and the earth is part of our larger body, and the planets in our solar system are part of our larger body, and so forth and so on. So sometimes the stress is sitting at one of these larger areas. So it's not just a terror that you feel in your little individual human self, but it's a terror that exists in, oh, somebody else was saying they also have terror that exists at like a cosmic level. The planets also feel frightened. They also have their experiences that are uncomfortable. And so this is why we did a healing at the beginning of today's session to increase flexibility and stability. Remember, in that sense of self or identity, is because then with the flexibility, we can move awareness up to that larger degree, that more universal perspective. And from the more universal we get, the less impactful negativity is. There's a lot in that statement, and we're just running out of time. So I'm not going to unpack that one right now. But when the terror is there and we take recourse to the source of creation, which is infinite and unbounded, and we rest in the lap of Mother Divine, then the terror efficiently eliminates from the system in a way it cannot if we're gripped by it or we're acting on it in some way. If we're acting on it, then we give it credence, we kind of give it strength, we give it power. So staying the course of evolution is the key there. And that's more or less a nutshell thing. She has, another lady says she realizes that it is a positive karmic purification taking place. And when her attitude changes, she no longer minds the terror as much. That's beautiful. Thank you for validating that and adding that perspective. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. So you guys were awesome today. Thank you. We didn't get to all the levels, but tomorrow we'll look at, today we got to all the subtle layers. So maybe tomorrow we'll look more at the denser layers, and that will give us the opportunity to do like more like laser-like healings, like going in and doing real specific healings for specific things. Although that liver healing was kind of nice tonight, wasn't it? Yeah. So may everybody's livers just be filled with bliss. I hope you, for those of you who will be going to bed soon, may you go to your sleep time and enjoy the bliss that is in the liver. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, someday I'll play some songs for you guys, but I have to warm up first. Anyway, oh, what's the place again? Oh, the place. Rapa Nui. She's asking, what is it, Easter Island? Easter Island is like a big island of Swiss cheese. It's a big igneous rock. It's like my igneous rock here, only think of that like only it's an island, right? So it's coming up out of the ocean and it's just full of holes, full of caves, thousands and thousands of caves. So yes, I love my rock too. Anyway, thank you guys. Thank you everybody for being with me. It's been wonderful. Oh, yeah, right. We should totally jam. Bye. See you tomorrow, everybody.